On my 18th birthday, my parents gave my brother a watch, put his name on my cake, so I left with $60 and vanished. 2 weeks later, Dad called sobbing. "Your room is still here." I was 17 when I started counting down the days until my 18th birthday. Not because I was excited to become an adult, and not because I thought turning 18 would magically make me free, but because I knew that was the first day I could legally leave and no one could force me back. My name is Ryan Lane, and I grew up in a house that looked almost perfect from the outside. It had 2 stories, clean white shutters, a big oak tree in the front yard, and the kind of quiet neighborhood people brag about when they want strangers to think their family is stable. From the sidewalk, our house looked warm. It looked safe. It looked like the kind of home where birthdays were celebrated, where parents ask about your day, where everyone sat around a table and laughed like they belonged to each other. But inside, it never felt like home to me. Inside, it always felt like I was breathing someone else's air. I felt like a guest in a house that did not want me there, like I had wandered into the wrong family, and everyone was just waiting for me to notice. My brother Mason is 2 years younger than me, and somehow, from the moment he was old enough to smile, he became the golden boy. I do not mean that in a bitter older brother way, like I was jealous because he got more attention. I mean, Mason could have crashed the family car into the mailbox and my parents would have asked him if he was okay before they even looked at the damage. Meanwhile, I once forgot to vacuum before dinner and got grounded for a week. That was the kind of difference I grew up with. Mason made mistakes and they became stories. I made mistakes and they became evidence. So I learned early to live quietly. I learned not to take up too much space, not to ask too many questions, not to make noise when my parents were already in a bad mood. I learned to listen for the shift in my father's voice when I walked into a room. His tone would tighten, clipped and tired, like I was a problem that had not been solved yet. My mother was different, but not better. She did not always yell. Sometimes that would have been easier. She had this way of looking straight through me, like I was someone else's child who had accidentally wandered into her kitchen, and she was too polite to tell me to leave. Mason, though, never had to learn any of that. He had an effortless smile, easy charm, and this strange ability to always be standing in the right light. He was the miracle baby, after a series of miscarriages. He was the one who made it. And I think my parents decided right then and there that he was special, that he was the child they had been waiting for. And everything else, including me, slowly faded into the background. Still, I tried. I tried harder than I should have had to. I got good grades, I stayed out of trouble, I did my chores, I worked part-time stocking shelves at the grocery store because I was already saving for college, already aware that my parents were not going to help me. Whenever the conversation drifted toward my future, my dad would just grunt and say, "You're smart, you'll figure it out." That was the closest thing I ever got to encouragement. Mason, on the other hand, got a new laptop for his 16th birthday because he needed it for school, even though everyone knew he mostly used it to play games and scroll TikTok. I remember asking my mom if I could borrow it one night to fill out college applications. She told me to ask my brother, so I did. Mason looked at me, shrugged, and said no. That was it. No one made him share. No one told him I needed it. No one even acted like my future was a real thing. So when my 18th birthday finally came around, I was not expecting much. I was not expecting a party or a gift or some emotional speech about how proud they were of me. Maybe I hoped for a card. Maybe a family dinner. I did not even need a present. I just wanted one moment, one simple acknowledgement that I had made it through 18 years in that house. I wanted them to see me, even briefly, and say, "You are here. You matter." Happy birthday. My birthday landed on a Saturday that year. I did not have to work, so I slept a little later than usual and came downstairs expecting, at the very least, for someone to say the words. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and found my dad tying a bow onto a sleek black box, while Mason bounced on his heels like a little kid on Christmas morning. I stopped in the doorway, still half asleep, watching this little family moment unfold in front of me like I was intruding on something private. My mom turned around with a big smile, not for me, and said, "Perfect timing. Come on, Mason, open it." No one looked at me. No one asked how I slept. No one said, "Happy birthday." Mason tore into the box and let out this fake gasp like he had just won the lottery. Inside was a silver watch, expensive looking, with a leather band and Roman numerals on the face. "Oh my God, Dad, this is so sick," Mason said, grinning as he slipped it onto his wrist. "Now I don't have to borrow your old one anymore." My dad laughed and ruffled his hair. "Well, you've earned it, kid. You've been working so hard lately." Hard. Mason's biggest accomplishment that week was making it to second base with some girl in his chemistry class. I stood there frozen, waiting for someone to remember why the day mattered. Waiting for someone to look at the calendar in their head and realize that this was my 18th birthday. My mother finally glanced at me, and for one brief second, I thought maybe she would say it. Instead, she said, "Don't look so sour, Ryan. It's not always about gifts. When you're older, you'll understand that what matters is who you become, not what you get." It hit me like a slap. She said it in that calm, condescending voice she always used when she wanted to sound wise, like I was some selfish kid who did not understand the deeper meaning of life. I tried to nod. I tried to swallow it. I tried to play along because that was what I had always done. But my throat tightened. "I thought we were having cake," I mumbled. Mason looked at me casually and said, "Oh, we did that earlier, while you were sleeping." I blinked. "You had cake without me?" My mom moved quickly, like she could already feel the situation slipping out of her control. "It was just a small thing, nothing big." I asked whose name was on it. The room went silent for just a beat too long. Then Mason smirked and said, "Mine." "I mean, it was a joint thing, but it's not your birthday. Don't be dramatic." My dad snapped, "It's just a cake." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the black box across the room. I wanted to ask them how they could give my younger brother a watch on my 18th birthday, eat a cake with his name on it, and then lecture me for looking hurt. But instead, I laughed. It came out sharp and short, and it did not sound like me. I laughed because if I did not, I was going to cry right there in front of them, and I refused to give them that satisfaction. Mason raised an eyebrow like I was the crazy one. My mom looked at me with pity and disappointment, like I had ruined a perfectly good morning by reacting to what they had done. That night, I did not even turn on the light when I went upstairs to my room. I sat on my bed for a long time staring at the floor, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I kept thinking the same thing over and over. They are never going to love you the way you want them to. It does not matter what you do. It does not matter how hard you try. You are never going to be Mason. And once I finally let that thought land, something inside me went quiet. So, I made a decision. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed it with a hoodie, a water bottle, a few granola bars, and the $60 I had hidden in an envelope at the back of my sock drawer. I did not have a real plan, not really. But I had my ID, a phone charger, and a bus schedule I had secretly printed at the library weeks earlier. At midnight, while the house was quiet and everyone was asleep, I slipped out the back door and did not look back. I thought I would stay gone for a day or two. Maybe I would sleep at the shelter near the downtown church. Maybe I would try to find another part-time job. Maybe I could couch surf if I found someone kind enough. I had no idea what I was doing. I only knew I could not stay in that house another night. What I did not expect was that 2 weeks later, my phone would buzz with a number I had not seen in days. My dad. I let it ring the first time, then the second. On the third try, I answered. Before I could say anything, his voice came through, choked up, barely above a whisper. "Your room's still here," he said. "Please pick up. Just tell me where you are. Please." That was when I realized something had shifted. I did not know what or why, but something had changed. And the part that scared me most was that I was not sure I wanted to go back. So I did not. Not that week, not the next, not after the voicemail. 2 days later, my dad left another message. This one was quieter, but there was anger underneath it. "I don't know what you think you're proving, Ryan, but this isn't how family works. You don't just vanish." That almost made me laugh. It was ironic, considering I had spent my entire life feeling like a ghost in that house. But I stayed gone. I bounced around at first. I slept at the church shelter, then eventually found a small room-for-rent situation run by a retired mechanic named Lynn who had a soft spot for strays, both dogs and people. I paid him what I could, $130 a week for a mattress in the corner of his garage that he had walled off with plywood and a curtain. It smelled like oil and rust, and it was not comfortable, but it was warm. And for the first time in my life, I did not have to tiptoe around someone else's rules just to exist. I found part-time work unloading trucks at a shipping warehouse. The hours were rough, and the work left my hands sore, but I did it. I spent the rest of my time at the public library filling out college applications on computers that logged me out every 30 minutes. I did not tell anyone where I was. I did not want my parents to find me until I had something to show for being gone. But eventually, they found me anyway. Mason showed up first. I was walking out of the library one afternoon when I saw him leaning against a car that was definitely too nice for him. It was a shiny black new model with leather seats, and he was staring at his phone like he was bored. He had not seen me yet. My first instinct was to turn around and disappear through another exit, but curiosity pinned me in place. He looked up a second later and smirked like I was late to something I had not known I was invited to. "There you are," he said, slipping his phone into his jacket. "You look like crap, bro." "Thanks," I said flatly. "Seriously though," he said. "Mom's freaking out. Dad's being weird. You made your point, okay? Come home." "I'm not coming home." Mason rolled his eyes. "Come on, man. You had your little tantrum. Now everyone's waiting for you to crawl back so things can go back to normal." Normal. That word hit me like a brick. "You mean where my birthday cake had your name on it?" I asked. "That kind of normal." He shrugged like I had just brought up the weather. "It was just a mix-up. You always take things so seriously. They didn't mean anything by it." "You're right," I said. "They never mean anything by it. That's the problem." His smile dropped. "Look, I don't know what kind of sob story you're telling yourself, but you're not the only one with problems, okay? You don't see me running away." "No," I said. "You just see the world bending to make sure you don't have to." That got to him. His jaw tightened. "Whatever. Just know that when you finally come back, don't expect a parade. They've been bending over backward trying to reach you." I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Did they tell you what they said the night I left?" He did not answer. I had not expected him to. "Tell them I'm doing fine," I said, turning away. "And if they're really so worried, they can stop calling my number and start thinking about why I stopped picking up." A week passed, then two. I started hearing less from them. No more voicemails, no more texts. I figured they had given up, moved on, and probably turned my bedroom into a storage space, a mini home gym, or whatever project they could come up with to fill the silence where I used to be. I thought that was the end of it, until I got an email. It was not from my parents. It was from my high school counselor, Mrs. Devereaux. The message was short and awkward, like she did not know whether to sound concerned or polite. She said she hoped I was safe and okay, but she wanted to let me know that my transcripts had been requested and withdrawn. According to the system, my parents had contacted the school and said I would not be attending college and that any further application correspondence should be canceled. I sat in the library, staring at the screen without breathing. I read it again, then a third time. They had tried to erase me. I called the school immediately, my heart pounding. And thankfully, Mrs. Devereaux picked up. I explained everything. She confirmed it with an apology in her voice, and I could tell she had not known the full story. I spent the next 2 days untangling the mess, making sure my applications had not been completely destroyed. A few deadlines had already passed. I missed a scholarship opportunity I had actually had a real shot at. That night, I did not sleep. I kept turning that email over in my head, wondering what kind of people went out of their way to block their own child's future. It was not even about control anymore. It was sabotage. I did not want revenge yet. What I wanted was to disappear from their narrative so completely that one day they would have to explain to someone why their firstborn son never came home. But fate had other ideas, because about a month later, I got a letter in the mail. A real letter. Paper envelope, no return address, just my name written in my father's handwriting. Inside, there was no apology. There was a a literal bullet-pointed list of things I needed to do before they could talk about me coming home. It included things like, stop blaming others for your unhappiness, apologize for walking out and ghosting your family, recognize the sacrifices we made for you, understand that we do what we do out of love. I read it in silence. Then I laughed because what else could I do? It was not a letter. It was a contract. It was a way to make me the problem again, a way to drag me back into the loop of guilt, obligation, and performance. I crumpled it, tossed it into the trash, and told myself for the 100th time that I was done. But then came the moment that changed everything. It happened in early spring. I had started working more hours at the warehouse, trying to save enough for community college. One evening, Lynn walked into the garage, holding a thick envelope, and said someone had come by earlier, asked if Ryan lived there, and handed it off without saying another word. I opened it slowly. Inside was a formal legal letter from a lawyer's office. It said I was being removed as a dependent from my parents' tax records retroactively. It said I was no longer considered part of their household. It said I had until the end of the month to collect any remaining personal belongings from their property before everything would be disposed of at the homeowner's discretion. There was a sticky note attached. It said, "This is what consequences look like. Signed, Mom." That was the moment the switch flipped. I felt something inside me harden and settle. It was not anger. It was not even sadness. It was clarity. They were not just trying to hurt me. They were trying to erase me. And if they wanted to play that game, they had no idea who I was about to become. For 2 days after I got that letter, I barely spoke. Lynn noticed, but he did not press me. He just slid an extra sandwich across the workbench during lunch and said, "Whatever it is, kid, it won't last forever. Not if you don't let it." I nodded, but I did not believe him. Rock bottom does not always look like some dramatic fall. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is just a dull ache that settles in your chest and refuses to leave. It is walking home after a double shift with sore fingers and soaked boots, and realizing you do not have a home, just a garage with no insulation and a curtain for privacy. It is sitting in that cold space at 3 in the morning with your hoodie pulled over your face, knowing your own family has written you off like a bad investment. They were not just done with me, they were punishing me for leaving. I did not even have much to go back for. A few clothes, a shelf of books I had collected over the years, my guitar if they had not already sold it or thrown it away. But even then, I felt hollow, knowing that my name, my space, and my existence in that house were being scrubbed clean like I was a stain on their perfect family portrait. And the worst part was that I almost let it break me. That week, I skipped 2 shifts. I did not answer when Lynn knocked. I did not check my email. I barely ate. I barely slept. I just lay there, listening to the wind push against the garage door, wondering what I was even doing anymore. Then something stupid saved me. A book. Not just any book. My book. A worn-out, dog-eared copy of Into the Wild by John Krakauer that I thought I had lost during the move. It was buried at the bottom of my backpack. I had read it 3 times already, but that night, I flipped it open and landed on a sentence I had underlined years earlier in red ink. Happiness is only real when shared. It should have made me feel worse. Instead, it made me sit up. Because in that moment, I realized I had been trying to share my life with people who had never wanted it. I had kept handing them pieces of myself, hoping someday one of them would say, "We see you. You matter." But they never would. That was not the family I had been born into, and I could not change them. I could only change me. The next morning, I went back to work. I apologized to my supervisor for missing shifts and offered to take the graveyard slot for the next 2 weeks to make up for it. He did not ask questions. He just grunted and handed me a badge for the overnight crew. The work was harder, heavier boxes, colder nights, longer hours. But I did not care. I needed it. That was the beginning of my rebuild. Quiet, simple, and mine. Over the next few months, I fell into a rhythm. Wake up, work, read, sleep, repeat. I started putting aside every extra dollar. I downloaded budgeting apps. I cut out anything unnecessary. I even stopped using data on my phone to save on the bill. Lynn noticed and started slipping me extra chores so I could earn credit toward rent. Sometimes he would toss me a 20 and say it was for groceries, pretending it had nothing to do with the fact that I had just scrubbed his entire truck engine clean. I applied to community college again, this time without my parents' help, and paid the application fee myself. I wrote an essay so brutally honest that I cried after hitting submit. I did not sugarcoat anything. I wrote about growing up invisible. I wrote about the way silence can scream louder than words. I wrote about rebuilding yourself from scratch when no one hands you the tools. And slowly, things started shifting. One night, while I was mopping the warehouse floor, I overheard two of the logistics guys complaining about a glitch in the shipping software. I had picked up a little coding knowledge from a free online Python course I had been playing around with. Nothing serious, just enough to understand a few patterns, but I offered a solution anyway. They shrugged it off at first. 2 days later, one of them pulled me aside and said, "Hey, that thing you mentioned? It worked." After that, I became the unofficial guy people came to when the systems froze, the printers went haywire, or some scanners stopped syncing. I did not get a raise. I did not get a title, but people started learning my name. They started thanking me. They started seeing me. It was a strange feeling, the kind of strange that makes you sit with it in silence and whisper, maybe I am not just background noise. My first big win came in early summer. I got an email from the community college. I had been accepted with a scholarship too. Not a full ride, but enough to cover tuition as long as I kept working part-time. I remember staring at the screen and rereading the word congratulations over and over, like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. Lynn let me use his kitchen that night to bake a boxed cake. It came out lopsided and slightly burned, but I did not care. I wrote my own name on it in blue frosting. Ryan. Just Ryan. No shared celebration. No forgotten candle. No lecture about gratitude. Just me, a beat-up garage, and the first piece of joy I had built with my own 2 hands. I did not call my parents. I did not tell them, but I knew they would find out eventually because people talk, especially in our town. Sure enough, one day at the grocery store, I ran into an old neighbor, Mrs. Kavanaugh, a kind woman who used to sneak me cookies when my mother was not looking. She smiled wide when she saw me and said, "I heard you're going to college. Your mom must be so proud." I just nodded and said, "Yeah, must be." But I knew better. They were not proud. They were probably furious that I had done it without them. And I was okay with that, because their approval was not the currency I needed anymore. Later that week, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my mother. She did not cry. She did not yell. She just said, "We heard about school. Glad you're doing well. I hope you'll remember where you came from." I replayed that line 5 times. Where I came from. Like I was some wandering stray that needed to return to its kennel. But I did not feel angry. I felt free. By the end of that summer, I had moved out of Lynn's garage. I found a shared apartment near campus with 2 roommates who mostly kept to themselves and did not ask many questions. I started classes and landed a part-time IT job at the school help desk. It was not glamorous, but it paid the bills. Little by little, I began building something that looked suspiciously like a life. I still had scars, emotional ones. I still flinched when people raised their voices. I still second-guessed compliments. I still caught myself apologizing for taking up space. But I was learning. Healing is not always loud. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just drinking coffee in a quiet room and realizing you are not afraid to be seen anymore. One night, I opened a new notebook and wrote down a list. Not goals, truths. Things I had learned. Things no one could take from me. At the top I wrote, "You do not need permission to become someone they never imagined." Under that I wrote, "Your worth is not measured by someone else's disappointment. You can start over even when they say you cannot. Family is not who you are born to. It is who roots for you in the quiet." I closed the notebook, turned out the light, and slept better than I had in years. But I should have known it was not over, because just when I thought I was finally free, something happened that pulled me right back in. Something that changed everything. It started with a message request late one night. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, reviewing notes for an upcoming midterm with a half-eaten burrito beside me and 3 different laptop troubleshooting tabs open when I noticed a new message on Facebook. I had not used Facebook in months, maybe longer. I only kept the account alive for emergencies or identity verification. But the sender's name froze me. Mrs. Langford, my parents' old neighbor, the one with the garden that used to spill into our backyard. She had always been kind, but distant friendly in the way suburban neighbors often are. Cordial waves, polite holiday cards, whispered gossip over fences. I had not spoken to her in years. Her message was simple. "Hey Ryan, I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I thought you had the right to know. Your parents listed your childhood home for sale. The sign just went up this week. Hope you're doing well." I stared at the message, then read it again. The house was up for sale. Our house. For a second, I did not feel anything, just blankness. Then something flickered. Not exactly sadness, not anger either. Something sharper, colder. I had always assumed they would sell eventually. I figured once Mason graduated or moved out, they would downsize or relocate to some gated community where the HOA newsletter came with a warning label. But the timing did not sit right. After everything, after cutting me off, after pretending I never existed. Now they were selling the house where they had erased me. So I did what any reasonably curious person would do. I opened Zillow. It did not take long to find the listing. There it was, a bright, overexposed photo of our front porch. The white shutters had been cleaned up. The old oak tree still cast a crooked shadow across the lawn. The listing description was flowery and fake. Charming family home with rich character lovingly maintained for over 2 decades. 4 bedrooms, custom finishes, quiet neighborhood. I scrolled through the photos. Living room, kitchen, master bedroom. Then bedroom 1. I clicked and my breath caught. They had turned my room into a guest suite. Neutral walls, beige bedding, generic art prints. Every trace of me was gone. No posters, no desk, no shelves. No sign that someone had spent 18 years growing up in that space. It looked like I had never been there at all. They had not just pushed me out. They had erased me. That was the moment the idea began to take shape. Not revenge. Not yet. At first, it was just curiosity. I wanted to see the house one more time before it belonged to someone else. So that weekend, I borrowed a collared shirt from my roommate, printed a fake pre-approval letter using a free online template, and booked a tour through the real estate site with a burner Gmail account. Buyer name, Ryan L. Email, lamepurchases@gmail.com. Mail to, lamepurchases@gmail.com. I did not know what I expected to feel when I pulled up to the curb in a borrowed car. Maybe a rush of emotion, maybe nostalgia, maybe bitterness, but mostly I felt numb. The porch still creaked the same way it used to. The front door still had the scratch near the bottom from when I had once tried to sneak in a stray cat. And the real estate agent, a perky woman named Sasha with 2 white teeth, had no idea she was walking through a landmine. "So the sellers are really motivated," she chirped. "They're looking for a quick close. They've already moved most of their personal stuff out, looking to downsize now that their youngest is off to college." I nodded politely and let her guide me from room to room. I barely listened. My attention was on the walls, the spaces, the energy, and the gaping absence of me. When we got to the backyard, I paused. The fence was newer. Mason must have helped build it, or at least posed for a photo while someone else did. The treehouse I had built with my uncle when I was 12, back when I still had hope, was gone, torn down. Nothing left but a patch of disturbed dirt and a few rusty nails sticking out of a log. Sasha looked at me and said, "I'll give you a minute." She must have sensed something in my silence. I nodded and walked toward the back fence, keeping my hands in my pockets so they would not shake. That night I sat in my car, long after the engine had cooled, and I knew it was not just curiosity anymore. It was war. They wanted to pretend I had never existed. Fine. Then I would make sure the world knew exactly who I was, and that they were the ones who lost me. I did not want to burn the house down. That would have been too easy, too fast. I wanted something slower, smarter, permanent. So I started planning. First came research. I spent the next week digging through property records, figuring out who actually owned the house and what their financial situation looked like. Thanks to a few publicly available databases, I found something interesting. The mortgage was not paid off, and they were behind. Not by a lot, just a few months, but enough to raise questions about why they were really selling. I filed that away. Next, I got help. I called someone I had not spoken to in a while. Milo, an old classmate from high school who used to run the tech club and now worked freelance in cybersecurity. We were not close, but I knew two things about him. He hated bullies, and he owed me a favor from way back when I had covered for him during a plagiarism accusation. We met for coffee. I laid out a version of the story, not everything, just the core of it. When I finished, he asked, "What do you need?" I said, "I need access to the real estate documents, maybe the seller disclosures, any correspondence I can find. I want to know what they're hiding." Milo cracked his knuckles and said, "Give me 48 hours. He came through in 36. It turned out my parents had listed the house without disclosing a major plumbing issue that had started in the basement. It was the kind of issue that could cost thousands to fix. The documents were not just misleading. They were forged. Illegal. I saved every file. I printed copies. I uploaded backups to encrypted cloud storage. The evidence was there, but I did not want to blow it all at once. Timing mattered. Precision mattered. Meanwhile, I reached out to the college administration office and confirmed something I had been quietly working on for months. I was eligible to transfer into a full scholarship program because of my GPA and work-study contributions. They wanted me to speak at fall orientation as a first-generation student. That was when the idea hit me. What if I invited them? Not directly, of course, but what if they saw me standing on a stage holding a scholarship certificate being announced to an audience as someone they had given up on? And what if right around the same time the buyers for their house backed out and someone reported their fraudulent documents? What if everything they had built their image on started to crack? Not because I screamed, but because I succeeded. Because I smiled. Because I made it without them. And because I made it clear they had never been part of the journey. That was the setup, and I was not done yet. I had one more card to play. Mason. He was still their golden boy, their pride and joy. But I knew things about him, things even they did not know. Old screenshots, messages he had sent from a school-issued iPad when he was 17, joking about borrowing money from my dad's wallet and blaming the maid. Comments about blowing off community service hours and having his friend sign attendance forms. Minor things on their own, until you packaged them together and handed them to a college admissions committee. I had not used any of it, not yet. I would only use it if they pushed. Because I did not need to destroy their lives. I just needed them to watch me build mine brick by brick, speech by speech, without them. And when the moment was perfect, I would drop the match. Quiet, controlled, undeniable. Then I would walk away. Not bitter, not broken, just free. I did not want the ending to be loud. No scene, no tantrum, no screaming in the driveway. I wanted it to feel measured, like placing the final stone on a grave. And that was exactly how it played out. The house sale was the first domino to fall. I timed everything carefully. I waited until the buyers had gone through inspection, financing, and all the drawn-out steps that make people emotionally and financially invested. Then I sent them a small anonymous package through a third-party forwarding service that guaranteed no return address. Inside was a flash drive. On it were photos of the basement flooding from the old sump pump issue, screenshots of the forged disclosure document, and a typed letter that read, "This house has a secret. The sellers did not fix it. They covered it up. If you sign that contract, the problem becomes yours. Think twice. Ask the agent about the sump pump and see what happens." The fallout was immediate. 3 days later, the house disappeared from Zillow. The buyers backed out. The listing went dark. And my parents, who were already behind on the mortgage, were suddenly staring down foreclosure if they could not find a new buyer in time. Except this time, they could not fudge the paperwork. The plumbing issue had been flagged legally and publicly. Any new buyer would demand repair credits they could not afford to give. After that, I did not even have to lift a finger. I just watched. Meanwhile, I said yes to the orientation speech. The school had arranged for a local news crew to film parts of it for a segment on community success stories. I did not expect it to become a big deal. I thought it would be a 5-minute slot on a sleepy Sunday news hour. But what I did not expect was the article. A few days after orientation, someone from the city college board reached out and asked if they could feature my story on their website. I said sure, figuring it would be a short blurb. Instead, they ran a full profile. Headshot, interview, the whole thing. The headline was dramatic. Maybe a little too dramatic, but it was real. From Down to Dean's List, Ryan Lane's journey from abandonment to academic triumph. And it spread. People shared it. Old classmates saw it. Teachers saw it. Neighbors saw it. Eventually, so did my parents. I found out through a secondhand Facebook comment someone screenshotted and texted to me. My mother had written, "This article is full of exaggerations. Some kids just don't appreciate how much their family sacrifices for them." Passive-aggressive. Just vague enough to seem subtle, but it was clearly her. She was spiraling. And I was not done yet, because Mason, the golden boy, had just started applying to transfer universities, and I still had those screenshots. I did not want to destroy his future, but I did want a warning shot. So I sent a short, anonymous email to the admissions office of the school he was aiming for. Just a few carefully selected lines about falsified community service records, a suspicious paper trail of attendance forms, and a history of academic oversights. I attached 3 old screenshots of him joking about it. I signed it, "For the integrity of your academic program." Whether they acted on it or not did not matter. What mattered was that Mason would know someone knew, and he would never feel untouchable again. Now, here is the part I did not expect. They came to me, not together, separately. First, it was my dad. He showed up at the campus help desk one Tuesday morning. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie was loose, his face looked haggard, older than I remembered. "Ryan," he said, "we need to talk." I looked at him calmly, steadily. "You mean now that the house is unsellable and Mason's applications are falling apart?" I said, keeping my voice quiet. He blinked like he had not expected me to admit it. "We didn't know it had gotten this bad," he said. "You've made your point, okay? We get it." "No," I said, "you don't. And that's why it got this far." He tried again. "We can fix it. Maybe you can come home. We can talk this through." I gave him a small, cold smile. "There is no home," I said. "You burned that bridge and sold the ashes." Then I turned around and walked away. He did not follow. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from my mother. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper slipped under my apartment door in the middle of the night. It said, "Ryan, we made mistakes. I see that now. But you're being cruel. Punishing us like this doesn't make you better than us. Please, this is your family. Mom." I did not respond with words. Instead, I did something else. I sent her a photo. A simple one. Me standing in front of the college banner, holding my scholarship award, smiling. On the back I wrote, "This is what consequences look like." And that was the last message I ever sent them. Since then, the house has been foreclosed on. Mason transferred, but not to the school he wanted. My parents moved into a rental house 2 counties over, smaller and older, with a lawn they do not post pictures of. As for me, I'm thriving. I graduated with honors. I started working with a nonprofit that helps first-generation students navigate college without family support. I mentor kids who feel invisible, just like I did. I have a new apartment, a dog, a full fridge, and friends who choose me. Not once have I needed to look back. My revenge was not loud. It did not come with slamming doors or screaming matches. It came with quiet wins, with unstoppable progress. With the kind of success you build brick by brick, while everyone who doubted you stands around waiting for you to collapse. And the best part is that my parents will spend the rest of their lives pretending they did not lose a son, while I spend the rest of mine never needing them again. I was never the disappointment in that house. I was the escape artist they never saw coming.